Good morning and welcome. The time is already 2 minutes past 10. Without wasting much of your time and our time as well, I think it's better for us to start, and so that we can start the day the way we would like it to go. So you're welcome to the second part of our workshop called Connectivity and Inclusivity in Higher Education. We are very pleased to have you, and we hope you have a very good time. I'm Cecilia Medupin, and I'm from the Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences. But before we start, I think it's very good for us to be able to introduce ourselves so that we know who we are, and so that we can properly and effectively occupy our spaces, and so that the few hours we will be here together, we will know who is who, and then we'll feel at home. And there are some people that just came in now, so I will start from wherever my hand takes me. So, so that I quickly tell you who they are, and then you can say hello to your neighbor, and ask them where they came from. And, you know, maybe if they are from London, or they are from Glasgow, or Edinburgh, then you will know, at least you just know. But here we have Professor Chris Hadeker, he's there. And then we have, Amy and Eleanor from Learning and Development. We have Cornelia herself from EDIA. We have Ben Ayres. We have Beata. We have Jen O'Brien from SEED, we have Matt from Reading, we have Katie from Department of Earth and Environmental Science, Katie Joy, we have Giles Johnson, who is Director for Social Responsibility. We're happy to have you. Okay, for what? You see, I won't introduce anyone. And then we have Vice President for Social Responsibility for the university. We have Professor Nalin Tucker. He's going to say a few words with us. And then within this area, we have Catherine Sutcliffe from FBMH. We have, I don't know. We have at the back, we have Cindy. She'll be giving us a talk and reflection in a few minutes. We have Margarita Polachi, thank you, from EASE. We have Veronica from EASE. We have Katrina Lowland. We have Mike Barton, who is the head of department for EASE. We have Anne Webb, whom you know, some of you, and she is the professor of atmospheric radiation. You will see her again and again. She is very wonderful. We have Catherine Harrison. She is the coordinator for outreach in the EASE department. We have Esther Tambi. She is from the Women of St. Joseph, representing all these kind of activities in the women's group. We have Kathy Walton, who is from the EASE department. We have Catherine Noland. She is from Earthwatch Institute in London, in Oxford. We have Sarah Lam from Earthwatch. And we have Jane Delaney from Newcastle. And then we have Danielle from Atkinson from Newcastle. And then we have Petra Kola, who is one of our event assistants, with Rachel Yan, who is they are also our students. We have Hilary Jorgegan. She is the director of NERC for the project Engaging Environment, and she will speak to us later. And am I missing somebody? We have Denise Chung. She is one of our students, and she will be taking the notes, and she is very articulate. I'm missing somebody else. Sorry, we don't know you.
From Ecology, Diversity and Inclusion Department.
Correct. Thank you. And then we have somebody behind, and then we have Victoria Egerton, correct, from EASE. And then we have somebody behind Victoria.
Is it me?
Oh, yes.
I just realised I haven't been to part one. So I'm Claire, and I'm from Masters of Public Health programme involved in cultural competence, and I was really interested in the training.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then who else am I missing? Aha, yes.
Hi, I'm Lisa from the Institute of Teaching and Learning. I didn't make it to part one either, but I just really want to hear and learn and meet people.
Well, you're welcome. So in the few minutes, I just want you to talk to each other so that while we invite Professor Nalin Tucker to give us a talk, you know, just to say welcome, but I will give you time for you to speak to your neighbor. So, Professor, you're welcome, and thanks for your time.
So I wasn't expecting to speak today, so, and I can't match her enthusiasm, sorry. Very warm welcome to you. We're really delighted that so many of you have made a journey to come to Manchester, and the participation from Manchester itself. This is a really important topic, and you know, I'm really looking forward to the day. I missed part one as well. and I'm going to have to, unfortunately, pop out for a short while during this session. So, but I'm very much looking forward to it. For those of you not familiar with Manchester, it's always this weather in Manchester, so you should come more often. So, warm welcome to you all. Hope you have a very successful day and session through the sessions.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
we're grateful.
thank you.
So I think this is now giving us a few minutes to talk to each other so that you can look at some other things. So please, I don't know if Esther knows Hillary and if somebody knows somebody. Can you talk to the person, ask them who they are, where they come from? So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. There are some people that just joined us. We have Dave Schultz and we have Jamie Gilmore. They are professors of environmental sciences, specific areas. So thank you. Okay, thank you very much. And this is now beautiful. For some of us who will not know what had happened at the first workshop, please feel free to have a look at this video. And what we have done is to compartmentalize the sections so that you can listen to what interests you. But I can assure you that there are many things to learn. And so this new workshop, this second part of the workshop, is to leverage on what we had and what we have synthesized from the first workshop. So here, there is a slight change to the agenda. Banji Adeomi, who is our Director for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion, is unavoidably absent, and she sent her apologies. So for that reason, we are going to, in the period where she will be doing her presentation, Hillary from Reading will address us. And as we are going along with this agenda, I would like you to please bear with us in the time so that we are able to match up all the plans we have for today. So I will just quickly give us a brief aim, objectives, how this workshop is being structured, the norms of engagement, and housekeeping. So these are the aims we have already put forward for the first event, for the whole pilot study. And we would like to build upon that. The aim of doing this kind of study is to help us to be able to think through what we do. How does inclusivity affect us in our workings, in our studies? How does it affect us in our day-to-day activities? What we are expected to do is that beyond the intellectual, cognitive abilities of applying EDI, we're expected to be able to connect it with our affective selves, in other words, with our minds. So that's why we are looking to do so, and Cindy will give us what we have had from the last workshop. So our objectives is to promote an open, safe, and inclusive, welcoming atmosphere, necessary to connect properly. And then Cindy will present the results, and then we'll listen to other presentations, and then we'll share knowledge during the breakout sessions, and then we'll go for a call for action. Because it's one thing for us to listen to a talk, it's another thing to think of how we are going to apply it, or what we are going to change, what we are going to modify, or what we are going to pick up. So Cindy will give us a talk, she will present the results from the first workshop, and at the same time, she will give us some exercises. So please feel free to address some of these things. And then we're going to have Adele, who will be giving us a talk online. That was why the Zoom was there earlier. And we will be able to ask her questions as well. So the topic she's going to be giving us is on appreciating diversity, a strategy for effective connectivity and community development. So she will harmonize her work, the strategy she's developing for people and organizational development, and how academic students are connected with the operations. And then we have Hillary, whom you have seen there. She will address us later as she gives us an overview of how this project, this particular study, fits into the broader picture. So after that, after the presentations, we have a few tea breaks, and then we have the breakout sessions. So from the breakout sessions, we are going to have some kind of discussions, but in the breakout sessions, these are the themes we are going to discuss. Inclusivity starts with I, a sense of responsibility, participation and collaboration are key values, addressing grievances. So these are some of the contents we synthesized from the last workshop. And inclusivity starts with I was what we picked from Banji's talk. It was very detailed, and it gave us an opportunity to see that as much as we are looking to practice inclusivity, we need to actually connect ourselves to the concept. If we do not connect ourselves, our feelings, our emotions to concepts, let's say circumstances, to issues, to challenges, only the intellectual, the mind, the cognitive, then we might have a struggle implementing EDIA. So part of that, what I took away from what she said was the fact that if we are going to go forward in the implementation of EDI, apart from paper, beyond policy, beyond data, beyond trying to tick the boxes, we must connect ourselves. So that harmony between the intellect and the mind is what we are learning from what she taught us, and we hope we can be able to share stories of where this had been practically applied in real life. So, because we are sharing stories, we are having discussions, we have our guidelines for a respectable space. Sometimes we may feel that this is a bit pedantic to repeat, but you know, when you deal with different kind of people from different places, you need to kind of tell them, you are welcome, but these are my rules. So that when people break the rules, you know, they kind of know they have erred in a way. So here today we have norms of inclusion. I will tell us more when we go towards the breakout session. So, and that means if we want people to be inclusive, if we want people to participate, we have to make them open. They must be comfortable that the space they are sharing details or telling you confidential things are actually, indeed, truly confidential. And then, of course, we also practice what we are saying we are doing. This kind of integration, amalgam of what we are doing, is what Hilary will give us deeper understanding later. And some of you would have signed their attendance at the registration desk. We are going to be taking some photos, and this presentation is being recorded. We are going to edit it and send it to you. But if you don't want your picture to be taken, like this is our student, Sangamitra, she's taking the pictures. If you don't, Sangamitra, if you don't want Sangamitra to take your picture, you can decide to, you know, turn your face the other side. So please, every information we have, either from the interviews we are going to have, there will be, Matt, can you raise up your hand? Matt might be speaking to a few people later. Some people didn't see you. So Matt might be interviewing people. Cindy also could be interviewing people. Cindy is at the last point. So please feel free. And it's just to ask us certain things that may be of help to all of us when we synthesize the information. So the toilets are available from all the floors in this department, in this building. There are toilets. And Eleanor and Amy's buildings are on the top. So they know that there are toilets at different corners and will be able to help us should there be. So the facilitators, we have Professor Ann Webb, she will be helping us to facilitate later. We have Hilary who will be facilitating. We have Amy, we have Eleanor, and then we have the Shells who will be there. So we will have lunch as at when due, and then at the end of our breakout session, we'll come back, we'll have tea, and then we'll come back here and discuss only the key findings, the good practices. We are not going to share people's personal stories here. Only the good practices, what we synthesized from such information. So I'll give you further information nearer the time. So this is where we stop, and if you have any question, please feel free to ask now.
Sometimes people like to use Twitter and tweet. Do you want anybody to be doing that as part of this session, or is it preferable that we keep it in-house within the space?
Well, anybody who has the time can do it. But, you know, we want to just enjoy. We don't want to put ourselves under pressure. If you like, you can take pictures, and, you know, but you are free. And we don't have a Twitter account, so we can use the department at EDIA. So at this time, we would like to welcome Cindy. Cindy to give us a talk. I'll quickly give you a brief on Cindy. Cindy is the managing director for TechU. And she is also a co-investigator for the Engaging Environments, a project that is sponsored by the National Environmental Research Council. So you could see the people from Newcastle, from Reading, from Oxford. These are the people who are part of the team I co-investigate for, and for which this project is a part of. So her company provides a range of knowledge transfer and capacity building solutions that will help us to benchmark and innovate through power of diversity, sectoral change, connectivity, and cultural translation. So today she's going to present the outcomes and the work behind the scenes of our workshop, Connectivity and Inclusivity. She will be talking more about the principles-focused evaluation. Cindy, thank you.
So I'm here today to talk to you about a topic that I am very, very passionate about, and that is evaluation. And I know it's not everyone's favorite topic. It's actually quite a boring topic. Let me just put a timer here for myself so I can see if I'm going really slow. Then I know. I'm very passionate about this topic because as an entrepreneur, I run 2 businesses, and efficiency and effectiveness are really important for the work that we do. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what that has to do with anything. Workshop 1 of this series dealt with the topic of EDIA. We collected some data, some information, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But essentially, the main objective of that, or one of the objectives of this pilot project, was to create a draft framework for EDIA principles in practice. And so what you have in front of you is not a full and complete draft framework. In fact, it should not be used as an EDIA framework for principles. It is basically an example of what a framework would look like. And I'm going to take you today through how we did this and what methodology was used. So the main message really that I would like you to take away with you today is that principles, and I'll define that in a moment, can help guide our vision. They can help plan our strategies. And they can also help us implement not just EDIA, but any project or initiative that we set ourselves out to do. It's a very powerful method, and I'd like to share that with you. But first things first, what do we mean by principles? Well, in simple terms, principles essentially are propositions or values that guide behavior or help us assess. Okay, that's the definition in the context of principle-focused evaluation that I have. So, for example, her principle is that everyone should have equal access to high-quality healthcare, and she will not compromise on her principles. So that's an example there of what we mean. So with that in mind, I'd like us to do a little bit of reflection. I'd like you to think a little bit about these set of questions that I'll present to you. They're quite ancient, but they're very enduring questions that we come across in our life at some point. What are your principles? If you've in your mind, or if you've got a piece of paper and a pen, you just jot down a principle or the main principle that you feel that you use to guide your work, or that you use to guide your life. What is a principle that you use? Just jot it down. If you don't have one, that's all right. These are very deep and ancient questions, so I don't really expect you to answer these on the spot. But if you do have one, then write it down. Now, once you've written that one down, I'd like you to consider, to what extent do you adhere to that principle? And this you can do on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is not at all and 10 is completely and absolutely. And again, I'm not going to check this. I'm not going to ask you to share this. This is just personal reflection. So now if you took your principle and you scored your adherence to that principle and you put yourself at 6 or above, so you adhere to it, what are the consequences? What do you see as a result of abiding by that principle? What happens when you abide by that principle? If you scored yourself to be 5 or below, then what, and you don't completely, or you do not adhere to that principle, what do you see? What is the result of not adhering? As I said before, these are questions that are quite enduring, quite philosophical almost in a way. And you can ask these questions as an individual, you can ask them as a family, you can ask them as a team, as a group of people that work and engage together. You can also ask them informally, but you can also ask them formally, which is what we did. You can ask them casually, or you can ask them systematically. You can ask them as just a brief distraction, or you can ask them with concentrated commitment. Now, once you start asking these questions formally and systematically and with concentrated commitment, then you start entering into the realm of seriously evaluating principles. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So essentially, principles help us inform and guide our choices. And in particular, we call on them when we're confronted with change, with complexity, and with uncertainty. But why focus on principles? Essentially, principles have helped, as I said, we all use them. But if you think about innovators or innovative initiatives, how is it that they adapt to change? How is it that they navigate turbulence and uncertainties in complex systems change? Well, more often than not, actually, they adhere to principles. That's what they have, because principles essentially help and inform and guide our decisions. They act like a sort of internal compass and help us inform and guide our decisions by telling us what to do. And so it won't surprise you, of course, where principles come from. They come from lived experience, they come from research, they come from expertise, they come from our values, family values or societal values or otherwise. And it will also not surprise you that principled people lead principled projects as well. However, the problem is that principles often remain tacit. They remain hidden. We mostly kind of sense them or feel them as kind of maybe gut instincts. And the problem with that is that then they are not shareable. They're not usable. And we cannot access them to inform our actions. And so principles-focused evaluation helps us with that. Now, we're all familiar with rules. Everybody knows rules. We've all had rules in school. There's nothing wrong with rules. Rules are very useful to prescribe and see specific behaviors or actions that we want to see. But the issue is that when we have complex environments, rules do not provide us with the flexibility to innovate and to adapt, and that becomes really problematic. Essentially, rules prescribe precisely, you must do this, whereas principles provide guidance. However, they must be interpreted, and we must be context sensitive. So it does require us to do more work. So examples are always very useful. So here are some examples of rules and their counterpart principles. So if a rule proves to be too rigid or too unhelpful, it actually can be reviewed. so that it can become a principle. And so here's some examples. It won't surprise you that I gravitate towards my favorite principle, which is that of evaluation. The rule usually for evaluation is that you have to deliver the report by the end of the year, and signed in the contract 3 years ago, whereas a good principle really and a good practice is to target the delivery of evaluation findings in a way that are useful to inform the people in the project so that they can deliver their activities with impact. A final report, it has its uses, but it's not as useful as targeted delivery of findings when they are needed by those who need them, or to those who need them. So, why am I advocating for principles-focused evaluation? As you could probably tell, I'm trying to evangelize you, soften you towards evaluation here. But why are principles important? Well, Michael Quinn Patton, who came up with this methodology on principles-focused evaluation, tells us that learning to evaluate principles and applying what is learned from evaluating those principles is taking on an ever-increasing importance because we live in an ever more complex world where effectiveness depends on our ability to adapt to context. And if we don't adapt to that context, the consequences can be disastrous. It goes without saying that we live in an ever more complex world. We have climate change, biodiversity and habitat loss, socioeconomic crises, and we have tools like SMART goals and logic models, and they work well when evaluating projects, but they actually don't work very well when we're trying to evaluate our strategy, or when we're trying to when we're trying to evaluate our advocacy efforts, or when we're trying to evaluate policy change, or we're evaluating social and ecological systems change, or we are within complex dynamic interventions trying to deliver within that. SMART goals on their own, they definitely don't work very well in these situations, at least not on their own. And so when we adhere rigidly to objectives that were set in stone years ago, this can often result in an exacerbation of challenges and issues and create more harms. And we want to avoid that. So I want to stress here that in the face of complexity, we need to have the ability to adapt. And principles can help support that. It's not the only way, but it can help us with that. And so a major premise of principles-focused evaluation is to look for effective principles in practice, in action, rather than assessing whether we have adhered to predetermined activities or objectives. And this is really important because, as we've seen before, rules and rigid contracts and rigid objectives, they just don't allow us to do that. How does principle evaluation work? Well, it examines principles. It looks at whether principles are clear, whether they're meaningful, and whether they're actionable. And if they are, then are they actually being followed? And if they are being followed, are we actually following them with the results that we want to see? And again, in the process of principles-focused evaluation, as any other type of research, you collect data formally, systematically, and with concentrated commitment. Now, principles-focused evaluation is not new. As I said before, it is a well-established methodology. Many papers and books have been written about them. The main proponent of principles-focused evaluation is Michael Quinn Patton, who was a former president of the American Evaluation Association and is an independent organizational development and program evaluation consultant in the United States. Now, very lastly here, when do we use principles-focused evaluation? Are you having a hard time reading this slide? It's on purpose. Really beautiful picture here from the U.S. Geological Survey, but it does represent a little bit of what I want to say. So a good instance to use principles-focused evaluation is when there's a high level of uncertainty about even how we want to define the problem that we're trying to solve, or there are disagreements even about the nature of the problem that we're trying to resolve. Principles-focused evaluation comes in handy in this way. It's also very useful when we have a diverse set of stakeholders that are affected or involved, and they may have conflicting or competing perspectives. It's also very useful when we have conflicting or confusing evidence to guide our way forward, our work, which often causes controversy and tension. Also when data is missing to help guide us. But it's also very useful when there's emergence, so projects or activities, initiatives are unfolding or developing in turbulent contexts. And it's also very useful when the key variables or the key interactions are not known in advance. So basically when you're pioneering, when you're making the path by walking it, you don't really know what you're confronting. And so principles is very useful in this situation. And so examples include bringing together a diverse group of stakeholders to address or to create an EDIA strategy, or bringing together a group of people to resolve or address environmental issues, or when a group of people with diverse backgrounds are coming together to address cross-sector issues, for example, poverty alleviation or the health system. Now, I was hoping that this wasn't going to be death by evaluation, but I do have one more slide on background to principles-focused evaluation. So we all know that criteria are very important. Criteria are the way that we evaluate or assess and judge quality. And the criteria for principles are the following. A good principle must be guiding. So it must help us to inform priorities and setting those priorities. It must be useful. It is interpretable, it is feasible, it is actionable. It must also be inspiring because values are explicit and it's motivational and it's meaningful. And it must also be developmental, so it's context sensitive. It's enduring because it's not time bound. And finally, like any other piece of work, it must be documentable so that we can assess whether the principle is relevant and whether it's being followed and with what results. Now, when do we use, so how do we use the results of principles-focused evaluation? What you have in front of you is an example of the results of themselves, but how do we use them? What can they be good for? Well, as I said before, they help us to evaluate strategy, advocacy, policy change, etc. But they're very useful, for example, when, as a group, we want to communicate principles to potential collaborators. We want to say, this is what we abide by. You want to work with us? Then this is how we work. Or when you want to set standards, for example, for contractors, or when you're putting out tenders. It can also help us in aligning multiple groups of people or departments within an organization while also respecting and acknowledging difference, which is what gives groups and individuals strength. So we're getting here to the end. Very finally, for workshop 1 of this series, I had the great pleasure of working with a series of practitioners, amazing, wonderful EDIA practitioners, and through informed consent, we engaged in a conversation about what their EDIA practices look like in action. I gathered all of this information from these conversations and I synthesized them into the framework that you see below. The framework that you have is not complete. I wanted it to fit in 2 pages, so many things have been left out. So this is just a sample that we have. And so the wisdom of the practice of these people is in this draft framework. Very, very briefly, the framework that you have has categories and has something called overarching principles, and it has operational principles. Principle categories are just a way to bunch principles together under a particular theme or topic. But the overarching principles are interesting because they are the ones that are very high-level principles and they provide strategic guidance. The operating principles under each of those, they're the ones that provide guidance on how the overarching principle can be operationalized. How do we actually do the particular principle that is being said? It's good and great to say, put in place infrastructure and governance for inclusion, but how do we do that? So operational principles tell us how to do that. Now, the strength and the power of the framework itself is not having the principles. This doesn't do anything. This is just words on paper. The power of a framework comes from working really dedicatedly to outline what are the desired outcomes that we wish to see from implementing the principle. And then working equally hard on outlining, well, what would happen if the principle is not in place, so the potential dangers and traps. And once, as a group of people or as an individual, you put yourself to outline those, then you're starting to be able to have information that you can use to test these principles. Now, have a little exercise. We'll just have a few minutes to do this, but if you can have a look, which principles in the handout that you have call your attention? Which ones are of interest? You can mark them with a little asterisk, or you can just keep them in your mind. And now I'd like you to consider, do any of these principles resemble your practice? Or any ones of these saying, yeah, actually, yeah, this one resonates with what I do. And as you look through the list, are there any principles that call your attention, but actually you don't have, so you would like to adopt? And then finally, if you have identified a principle or two that you would like to adopt, I'd like you to consider, what would it take to adhere to such a principle? Is there anything that stands in the way? Again, this is a big, difficult question, but if you can give it a think. So I'd like you to turn to a person close to you, anyone that you spoke to earlier, perhaps, or make a new friend, and share some of your thoughts and reflections on some of these questions. You don't have to share which principles if you don't feel like it, but any thoughts or reflections that you might have on the framework on that. So I'll give you a few minutes here to do that. Okay. Thank you, everyone. It's really great to see that you're engaging in conversations about principles. I'd like to call your attention back. I don't have Cecilia's voice here. Okay. So would anyone, does anyone feel like sharing their reflections, anything that they, that's remarkable of, that they would like to share? You don't have to, but if you feel like it, does anybody Want to share? Yes.
We talked a little bit about like different scales, like thinking about what is more department level, what would be implemented at the level of more our research group or group of researchers, versus what you might think about as an individual or as a lab group leader. You know, how these different ideas could be applied at those different scales, perhaps.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any other thoughts or reflections? You're all very engaged.
I'll share something.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that we all picked up on was the number 14 one about creating safe spaces, and actually how difficult it is to do that genuinely, and to kind of, how do you know when it's effective? That whole piece, actually, that kind of underlines everything. It's about that sort of genuine, authentic approach, and how that's kind of key to a lot of the other principles working.
And yeah, thank you for noting that, and also the one about the scale. And as I said, as I showed you in a previous slide, what this printout doesn't have is the columns on desired outcomes and also the potential dangers and traps. And precisely this reflection, these questions about, okay, genuine, what does that look like? And scale, what is that effective scale that we want, that this can be workable. The operationalization of principles, to bring them into practice, takes time, of course, and it was something that one of the speakers last time around talked about, is that creating that culture. As you put into practice these principles and create that culture around the results that you want to see, you can then start actively engaging in testing. And by testing, I mean having these recorded and systematic conversations and follow that over time. There's a very rigorous mixed methods approach to principles-focused evaluation that I don't necessarily want to bore you with, but if you want to know more, of course, I'm here always very happy to chat about that. So, as I said at the beginning, the main thing that I wanted you to take away with you is that principles can indeed help us guide our vision. They can help us guide our strategy and our implementation, not just of EDIA, but also of SDGs, of education, of sustainability. And so I'd like you to consider, or I would like to invite you to consider principles-focused evaluation as a useful tool to help you engage in more connected and inclusive decision-making with yourselves, with your teams, with your families. Now, a little bit of a spoiler. During the breakout sessions, you'll learn a little bit more about creating a group that hopefully will take this wonderful work that Cecilia has started a little bit further. If you want to know more about that, keep your eyes and ears open for that. Hopefully this group can generate some action, and we can take this work a little bit more further. So thank you very much. As I said, if you want to know more about this topic, you love evaluation as well, like I do, then come join me for a tea or a chat. Thank you so much.
Can we give her a round of applause? Just before Cindy goes very much backwards as she's moving, do you have any question for her? Do you have any question, any thoughts you want to share?
I guess we had a reflection point that I wouldn't mind sharing, and I'd appreciate people's thoughts of just how, and I mean this kindly in the spirit of working together and affecting change, how it's quite easy to line it all out on paper, and we actually sometimes need to recognise that some of these decisions are really hard, and you're sometimes working with people who have different principles or values, and it's easy to talk about winning over hearts and minds, but sometimes we have to be kind on ourselves as well in this process and thinking about aligning all of those different agendas. I don't know if that came up with anyone else, that this can be really hard, actually.
I was just going to follow up on that point, and just as a new person to the university, say, like, it would be really useful to understand a little bit better the framework that's already in place in the university for if you do have a situation where you don't really know what to do or you'd like some advice. You know, who do you go to? What's the sort of steps that you can take to try and get more information or understand what the best process for making the decision would be? I don't know if that information is available anywhere, but...
I think there are people who can answer that question here. In each department, there are representatives. There are EDI representatives. And we have people from the Directorate of EDI. And so you can answer the question there. Somebody could give her a microphone.
Thanks very much. I'm Tahira Majothi. I'm an EDI partner at the university. I'm here today with my colleague Umang. We do have a central EDI directorate. So if you do have a query, you maybe are starting a new project and you want to know about the evaluation, the data, the processes, you can get in touch with the EDI team. We can advise on equality impact assessments, so if anybody's got anything along those lines. If you have a query or just general advice, you can get in touch with us at equalityanddiversity@manchester.ac.uk. I'm around hoping to catch up with some of you and my colleague Umang as well, so please do come up to us at workshops if there's anything that you would like assistance with. Thank you.
Thank you. And she will be around today, so please feel free to speak and get further insight. So we are here happy to have Adele McKinley. Adele is the inaugural Director of People and Organizational Development. This usually, in the past, was called Human Resources. And I'm sure that is not a name that majority of people like to hear. But with the change of name, it means a change of things. In Africa, actually what happens is that you call a child a name you want the child to be. So names in Africa have meanings. So I want to believe that Adele had that kind of thinking, having done some, she stayed a bit in Senegal, or was it Kenya, somewhere in West Africa.
Senegal and Burkina Faso.
So maybe it was on the basis of that kind of principle that if we change it from human resources that people do not like and give it a very nice name called People and Organizational Development, you give them a bit of respect. So, so we are happy to have Adele. Adele, thank you. I know you are very busy. So Adele is very skilled, experienced. She's had diverse working experience either within academia, outside academia, financial institutions. And today, she's going to be presenting her talk on appreciating diversity, a strategy for effective connectivity and community development. So Adele, you are welcome. Exactly. So you're welcome, please.
Thank you. And it's really, thank you for inviting me, Cecilia. I know this is a really uplifting event, so hopefully I can continue in that theme. And I'm really sorry I'm with you today. I'm doing something that apparently has become a new thing post-COVID, which is not WFH, which is working from home. It's WFFH, which is working from a friend's home. The advantage of me doing that is my friend is Italian and is going to shortly cook me the most amazing pasta lunch. So that's where I am today, and apologies I can't be with you. And Cecilia asked me joining the university to issues of inclusion and diversity, and you've already heard from my colleagues in EDI about the amazing resources and the amazing EDI directorate and strategy that they're developing, so I won't repeat that, but just to give you a bit of a flavour of what I'm hoping to achieve with my team over the next period of time. And I didn't know Cecilia was going to give the introduction she did, but I'm glad she has, because changing from HR to people and OD was a very intentional decision by the university to bring, I guess, more of a face to people and organisational development initiatives than maybe has been in the past. So it's not just about changing the name, it's actually about changing the content and the approach to making sure that, you know, I am only here, my team is only here
to support you with your teaching, learning, scholarship, research, social enterprise endeavours. And if we're not meeting your expectations, then you need to tell me about that so we can fix it. We are not a little island off the coast of Manchester. We are part of this community, and again, our remit is to support you in all of your endeavours making this organisation successful. It's a shame that my colleague Angie Adewere, who started just before I did last autumn at the university, can't be here today. I know she is equally passionate about making Manchester a really great place to work and study, making it super inclusive for all colleagues, irrespective of their role within the university or where they come from, their backgrounds, culture, etc. So a few words from me, and then hopefully we've got time for a few questions. Let me see if I can even move the slides on. Oh no. See, I'm stopping at the first hurdle. Someone needs to help me. Right, there we go. So I wanted to start with this slide purely because it makes me laugh every day. And I've tried to look more like the composed figure on the right, given that you can actually see me, but often, as you know, Zoom meetings with audio only look like the figure on the left, and yeah, I've shown this just to make you laugh. I hope it has done as it does with me. So I think by way of introducing myself, and the reason I'm doing that is not to bore you with my career history, because actually that doesn't so much matter. What I think matters is what I think is important is underpinning our people, OD and EDI strategies, and what I think is important for the university's leadership team, again, is supporting your endeavours. And this is something that I talked through at my interview, so I guess it must have resonated because Malin and others gave me the job. But these are the aspects of leadership. I think if we get these right, our university is just going to be motoring, and it's already a clearly fabulous place to work. They're not in any order of importance. However, I'm going to start with having a voice, and this is really, really important to me and to the leadership team and to the development of people in OD and EDI strategies. Some people have a really loud voice in the university, and that's great. And other people are silent because we've not created an environment where people feel they can speak out. And that, to me, is fundamental to taking our university forward. We need to ensure that all colleagues feel that they can speak out honestly, openly, without fear of retribution, and that their voice matters and counts. And a big part of the EDI strategy that Banji's developed is focused on that. Some other things I think will take our culture forwards massively are trust. I think the pandemic, and you may argue differently, has helped hugely in developing an environment of trust, particularly I have to say within professional services, where now I think we're more judged on our outputs and not our presenteeism, and that's something that the research says, if you all know better than I, that organisations that are built on high trust and engagement are the most successful organisations in the world. Kindness, I think I was accused the other day of being a bit fluffy, and I really resent that from a people in OD perspective, because actually, again, research shows that when you have a humane culture and environment that is built on respect and kindness, you are more likely to be both individually and collectively successful. And well before, as I said to Malin and others before, the celebrities were wearing Choose Kind on their very expensive t-shirts. To me, it seems like that most simple of human aspects that is often forgotten in organisations really underpins success. And I would like to see Manchester being consistently a really kind and engaging organisation. Innovation, and hopefully this is something that you'll see with the new people in OD Directorate. Over time, we can't change the world overnight, but we're trying over time. It's about innovating and new ideas, new ways of doing things. And I value that almost as highly as kindness, that, you know, we cannot stay static. and whether it be supporting you in your endeavours or changing the way the organisation is structured, then I'm a big believer in everyone having a voice to give their ideas so we can really move the organisation forwards. And then lastly, but not least important at all, is listen, understand and act. There's a quote that says something along the lines of, if you talk, you're just repeating what you already know. If you listen, you might learn something new. And again, in the work that I hope to do at the university, that's really important, that I listen to my colleagues and their perspectives, because they will know much more than me often. So that's a little bit about who I am and what's important to me. This slide is from an organisation called Fantail, who I don't think we've used at the university yet, but I've certainly worked with in a previous life. They're a consultancy organisation who focus exclusively on how to make organisations and cultures more inclusive. And they talk about 4 things on their website. The slide is from their website. And I'll come back to each of these, but just so you can see, leadership being critical. So leaders genuinely understanding what an inclusive organisation looks like and be able to replicate that within our organisation. Taking action, we will be judged by what we do, not what we say. Putting EDI and inclusion particularly at the heart of our business or at the core of our business. And I think setting up the EDI directorate and having an EDI strategy is a big part of managing to say this is really core to who we are. And then making change personal. This isn't about mandating programs, albeit that might be part of the suite of solutions. This is about really helping individuals understand why inclusion and inclusive behaviour makes such a difference to individual and collective work at the university. So what are we doing? And I wasn't here this morning, so apologies if I'm repeating what you already know. So putting EDI at the heart of the university strategy, absolutely. And I think we need to do some work on what do we mean when we talk about quality, what do we mean when we talk about diversity, and what do we mean when we talk about inclusion. Because as you all know, they're three connected but very different concepts. We're developing the people and OD strategy and EDI strategies, and I can send, if anyone's interested, I can send by Cecilia a presentation later on kind of where both Banji and I are in the development of those strategies. They will go to the board for ultimate approval in July this year, and then we're going to be launching them across the university in September. And again, this isn't about producing documents that go sit in someone's drawer and kind of grow old and fade. This is about living, breathing change that makes this an even better place to work and study. Doing a huge amount of work on educating leaders and managers to develop inclusive working environments. And that's going to be a journey for many colleagues across the university, but it's one that we are on. We're systematically looking at all of our policies and working practices from an inclusion perspective. So I'm sure you will be very vocal when you see me for the first time. Like email me, call me, WhatsApp me, text me. If there's something that's not working and you can see is counter to our inclusion agenda, then just let me know and we'll do something about it. There's a lot of work to do in this area. So Banji and I are kind of dividing and conquering. We're starting with recruitment and looking at all aspects of recruitment to make sure that it's as inclusive as it can be, and we've got some work to do in that area. But there's pretty much everything that we do from an employee perspective we need to unpick and make sure that it really is truly inclusive. The hybrid working pilot, so for those colleagues in the room who are in professional services, this has been a game changer. It's been incredibly successful. Manchester is known as leading sector with hybrid working, and we're going to make that part of how we do business around here moving forward. And as you all know, that brings huge advantages. If we get it right, that brings huge advantages from an inclusion perspective. Celebrating differences, and in fact at the moment when I hop off this meeting I'm going to the first event of a new network called Women in Manchester, which today's event is on about the menopause. We have some academic experts from Loughborough University who are talking to us about that. But this is about celebrating all of our networks and really celebrating difference and doing that in a very intentional and overt way. Listening more to staff and students. So as I said at the beginning, you know, some staff and students, by virtue of their personality or the role they're in, just have this amazing opportunity to contribute to the university, and others are very quiet because we don't provide the environment for them to be able to speak out. So a lot of listening. So Banji and I have been out to lots of different staff groups who normally maybe wouldn't have the opportunity to share their views. And then really, we're trying to be really intentional in terms of inclusion. So yes, we need to set goals. Yes, we need to measure progress. You know, we need to make sure that that journey is going in the right direction. And you know, when I retire, which I'm hoping is in the non-too-distant future, albeit I love my job, so I'm not talking about next year. If someone said to me, you know, Manchester is the most inclusive organisation I've worked in, that would be a success. So that's some of the things we're doing. I will send you more information about this because we don't have the time now, unfortunately. But the People and OD strategy has 5 strands. So one's about service, and I know that you'll have all experienced some really crappy processes. We're going to fix those. Second's around leadership. Third's around performance and really providing a nurturing environment where we can all be successful. Fourth is around culture, and fifth is around wellbeing. With the exception of service, the others aren't in any necessarily order of importance. Service has to come first because it's if not broken, it's not in a good place at the moment, and you deserve better than having to go through processes that kind of suck the lifeblood out of you. And so that's what we're working on as a priority at the moment. And I can talk forever about this, so maybe you'll invite me back another time. And then lastly, this is one of my favourite quotes of all time. And again, if we get this right, and really make people feel great about being at Manchester, then just that we can move the world. And that's not just the media and optimistic, you know, it's evidence-based. If people are engaged with their organisation, then they can really move mountains. So Cecilia, the time you gave me, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to take questions, comments, concerns, or anything else you want to say.
Thank you very much. Can we give her a round of applause? I think there are many people who would like to ask you a few questions, especially with there are certain things that would have touched people, and I know there are 1 or 2 people. Yes?
Oh, I'm Katrina Jones. I'm a
She's
Youth
Katrina
Presidential
Jones.
Fellow in Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences. I was just going to say, I 100% agree with everything you were saying about building, you know, more personal relationships between the academic staff and the support staff. I think that's really great. And sort of building on that, I was wondering, do you have a physical office that academics could like go to actually speak to a person face to face about things?
So I have, so yes is the short answer. If I can give you a longer answer, so and I'll put it in the chat, my physical office is in John Owen's building, G27, on first floor, second floor, depending on how you define floors. I'm actually going to, John Owen's is like, as you know, this amazing, amazing building that is not conducive to people kind of having a pop in, kind of hang out, say hello, just kind of touch base type culture. So we're actually changing my office at some point into a place where people can just come and pop in, say hello, grab a coffee, get a big screen like the one I'm on now so that we can do some hybrid working. But yeah, at the moment I'm in G27 and I'm in the office probably 2 or 3 days a week. So please do come and see me. There was 3 lines of defence, by the way, to get to see me. This building is crazy.
and do you
turned on my door, and I'm like, what's that about? And then there was a PA, and then there was another door to me. So we're trying to, notwithstanding the fact this is a grade 1, grade 2 listed building, we're trying to make all of us a little bit more accessible.
And is there a POD sort of desk or something that we could go to just for more general questions?
Yeah, so there is, and I'll put that in the chat. So general questions, we are in the, I'm going to get it wrong, Simon building.
Oh, okay.
A whole section. I'll send the details to Steve.
Great.
You can send them out. There are kind of emails and chat boxes if you've got just like process questions, or if you want to actually physically see someone, then someone is in the office every day.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other question? Ah, yes, there is a question here right in the front. Could you introduce yourself, because at least
Sure. Thank you. I'm Katrin Noland. I work for Earthwatch Europe in Oxford. Cecilia invited us here today. Thank you for sharing. I think you mentioned the EDI strategy you're working on right now and rolling that out. And you mentioned listening a lot. I think that's really great. Could you share a bit more about how staff and students at the university were involved in that strategy and how that process worked?
Yeah, I can, and now that if he's still there, may want to add more from an EDI perspective. So I'm developing the people and OD strategy in Banji, and Nalin are developing the EDI strategy, but they're very, very aligned. So we've, since what we're in now, June, so pretty much since the beginning of the year, we've been in consultation across the organisation. So I've been to pretty much every, as a Banji, every leadership team meeting. We've had open forums, we've had surveys where people can give their input. We've been to frontline staff in particular who normally wouldn't have an opportunity to give their views. We've talked to the union colleagues. So we've also obviously got a lot of data from previous staff surveys and pulse surveys. So I think, I should know off the top of my head, we definitely, all people at the university have an opportunity to input, and we've probably spoken with, I'd say, well over 2,000 probably in total.
Thank you.
Any other question? Okay, I have a question for you. Adele, I know you are very busy, and we all understand. How does that strategy, the listening and understanding and acting, cascade into our day-to-day workings at the university, within maybe departments, within, just beyond hearing? How is this going to be entrenched into our workings at the university?
So there isn't a short answer to that. So one of the things that I'm grappling with at the moment is how do you shift culture in an organisation that's as vast as Manchester? So once I guess we've determined as a group, as a senior leadership team, how we want behaviours and values to be displayed, and listening obviously is part of that, then we need to think about how we, I was going to say roll it out, that's a horrible expression. How do we get across the whole organisation so people know that this is the way we do things around here? And that's going to be a bit of a challenge, and a lot of it is going to be about investment in organisational development, or what you would historically know as training and learning. We do want there to be, for us all to be able to express our individuality, but irrespective of where you are in the organisation, you get equitable opportunities to kind of share your voice and expect reasonably that action will be taken. As you know, Cecilia, there are some university-wide things. So as an example, the staff survey that have started, but we've stopped it for various reasons, and we're going to relaunch in September. And that's a great mechanism to get your voice heard. I know we all have a little bit of survey fatigue, but there's a very definite commitment from myself and Banji and Alan and others that we will take action on what we hear. And there are some key themes across the sector and in Manchester, as we know, that we need to get right: proper well-being, workload, stress levels, mental health. So we're working on some of those things already, but the staff survey will give us more data.
Okay, thank you. I know there will be other questions. I will get them across to you, because we're going to place some cartons somewhere. Some people may not be able to ask some questions now, but whatever they ask, I'll pass it on to you, and I'll pass it back to them. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course, thank you.
But before you go, please, is there anybody who wants to ask? Yes, there's someone who wants to ask a question.
I'll shout it out.
There is a microphone so that we can hear you, and Adele can hear you clearly. Please, Adele, I know.
Just on the staff survey, as you mentioned it was opened and went on for a month and a bit, and it closed a month ago. Is there any idea when, if anything, will come of the staff survey that was completed? And is there any reason why that wasn't published?
So I think I heard that. So was the question basically, why did we hold the staff survey and what were we going to hear from the people who had already completed it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in short, the reason we held the survey was because there was a routine issue with some of the questions that meant that not all colleagues got all of the questions, and the questions that some colleagues missed were really, really critical ones around leadership and around harassment. So from an integrity point of view, we didn't feel that we could continue when not all colleagues had had the opportunity to complete those questions. So we spent quite a long time actually debating what the best way forward would be, and thought actually stopping and restarting in the autumn would be the most appropriate way forward. And on your question about, so what are we going to do with the data that we've got, there's actually, I'm not trying to push the answer by the way, but there's actually a meeting of the staff survey committee this afternoon with the supplier to actually go through that. So again, if you don't mind, via Cecilia, once that meeting's happened and we've got a clear path forward, I'll share that with you.
But I just think it would be really good to convey that, the reasons for that, because there's kind of misinformation might fall if that isn't explained properly.
Can I just add, there was a supplier error. There wasn't an error at our end, it was an error at their end. And the way they configured it meant that some questions were missing, and we felt they were important questions. Altering the data to sort of extrapolate from it was very
I'm vaguely aware of that, but it's just that wasn't very well conveyed to. Okay, that's a good point.
Thanks very much for bringing it up. So I think that brings us to the end of the talk. We are grateful to Adele, and we hope you have a beautiful day. And everybody thanks you here. So, hope to see you soon. Thank you. So it's now time for break. So good afternoon and welcome back. We are doing very well with time. This is excellent. The time is 2:24. You're scared of. Yeah. So we are supposed to start the synopsis at 2:20, and we are here at 2:25. This is wonderful. So this is what we're going. This is what we're going to do now, and then by 3 o'clock, hopefully, we should be leaving here. We appreciate your time, and we want to keep to it. But before then, some of us, I just want us to give us something to see from the first event, so that maybe that will help us to just give us a bit of context. These were some interviews that were carried out by some of us from the last event, and just to, for the next few minutes, just to listen. Before we...
I'm Emily, and I work in the Manchester Environmental Research Institute. I really enjoyed the event. It was really inspiring to hear from so many EDI practitioners sharing their knowledge and experience. But it's really shown me what universities do on the EDI agenda. It really highlighted the actions that we have to, and the distance that we have to go to kind of get where we need to.
My name is Gabriel, and I belong to the philosophy department at the university. I'm very interested in the concept of connectivity, and my PhD is to do with connectivity and how the parts of the whole are related to each other and how they go to the whole. I think it's about time that different scientific disciplines should be brought together to contribute to the production of knowledge, which is more holistic. And this event has given the opportunity to people from different disciplines to participate in these levels about connectivity, inclusivity, equality, and diversity.
Hello, my name is Ilhan. I am starred in the faculty, so math and material. And today I'm so happy to attend these lectures and this workshop. Actually, we got some information about their accessibility and their inclusive and their inclusion about, and also we have
And I'm listening to all these speakers and hearing the participants and the other staff members together. I feel that the community is much more welcoming than I thought. And of course, there are quite a lot of obstacles on the way, there will be. But I mean, this is all a new system for not just the leaders, but also for the partners. So there has to be a constant effort, humble effort from both the sides to make all these things that we've reached so far into practice. So thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Hi, I'm Aram Gurmanian from the Department of Mathematics. The conference was a lot of fun. We ended up learning a lot, and there's a lot I'm going to try to keep from the conference and bring into mathematics if possible. Some of the ideas that were tossed around that were really cool was this idea of integrating inclusion not just in a systematic way, but also in a cultural way, but also in a pedagogical sense of how to bring inclusivity into the classroom, of how different styles of teaching and create a more inclusive or less inclusive classroom, how to be an inclusive leader, and who do you bring into something, and like out of something, like are there spaces that you do want to exclude someone, or is it always just inclusive, or something like that? So, yeah.
So thank you for just your time in listening to that. And we are coming towards the end of our workshop. And we've just had different discussions, sharing of stories that may be enlightening to some of us, that may be a cause of reflection for us in the next few days, in the next few weeks. And also, there could be a possibility that we would like to make a commitment to action. We are bringing in some cards where you might wish to write a personal commitment to yourself, and we'll post it to you in the next few months. So hopefully that will help us. So far we've had talks this morning. We had one from Cindy, who gave us an in-depth understanding of what it is with principles, focused evaluation. And then we heard from Adele talking about appreciating diversity and what her role is as Director of People and Organizational Development, especially in the development of strategies that will help us. And the strategies are not developed in isolation, they are developed in tandem with the equality, diversity, and inclusion. So I think that is actually speaking to us in how well we can amalgamate two things and then come up with something very systematic, very strategic for all of us. And we also had the reflection and the address from Hilary, Professor Hilary Jogigan, and I think it also gives us a cause for reflection, deeper reflection on how we see things, how we perceive things, and how we can actually have change. And we had gone into the sessions to have some kind of further reflection, I would rather call it, and listen to other shared stories. So at this point in time, the time is 2:30, maybe in the next 20 minutes, each group will have 5 minutes. All what we want you to share is this aspect. What contributes to EDIA in practice? We don't want to have to listen to other people's stories that had been shared in your group, because that is part of our norms of confidentiality. So we just want you to condense. Anybody representing that particular group should be able to come up with those things and then tell us in a nutshell. So at this point in time, I will call on Group 1. Group 1 to share what they have. And Group 1 was facilitated by Professor Dave Schultz and assisted by Denise Chung. So please, could you share information from your group? And people will need to be able to hear you without your mask.
Just to sum up the most important things we've discussed is one of the things is to provide the resources and support needed to implement the EDIA. For example, like if a colleague has to take maternity leave, instead of like having like multiple people, like the extra work spread it over multiple people? Should we have because it's kind of like a legitimate reason why that colleague isn't at work. Should we have like an extra person employed just to substitute the one who's on leave, and just to make it like more implemented across the workspace? The other thing is that having the support across the uni, not in just like undergraduate, but among staff or like among like uni students in general. Having those policymakers engaging with support groups on campus, so that like voices from like the kind of like ground level could actually reach the decision makers in the high level of the office level of like the uni. And some of us like suggested a long-term support for students across their undergrad and then, for example, like higher degrees, just for like mentorship and advisorship along the way. And the third thing is just to, and we mentioned like the WP check, which is kind of for people like applying for uni, having like, which are less advantaged backgrounds, and so that the uni would have like a lower kind of bar set for them to come in, so that we are more welcomed from of different people from diverse backgrounds. Yeah, I think that's it.
Does anybody have a question? Because I think I have a question to what they said. Yes, please.
Just a comment, really, just on the WP stuff we already. I don't think on the WP stuff we already do some of what you suggested. So we already have a way of encouraging and more WP students to be able to attend university.
Yeah, I think just to elaborate on that point, it was more about the pipeline into advanced degrees, because the expectations that are being set for people applying for PhDs often exclude people who didn't have a strong background. And so the idea of looking at the WP check, I think, was that might be something to consider when shortlisting PhD applicants for interviews, that would facilitate better representation, I think, at the higher levels. But yeah, you're right. Undergraduate, yeah, we understand that.
There is a question from Danielle.
It was kind of just on that point, that it's kind of still at early stages, but even on the point you just made about kind of graduate levels, there is a big piece of work at the moment about, I don't know the details. I don't know the details of what's in it, but I know that there is a big piece of work about improving the inclusivity of how we recruit our PhD students. So that is definitely on the agenda and is being worked on at the moment, and some people in the room might even be part of that project at this university. So Giles thinks he's chairing it.
So there is already a lot of work going on within the university, and so I think what you are saying is that we should reduce, if there's a possibility of reducing the paperwork. And I think there is a question we need to address. Maybe people from your group had to think about that. Providing long-term support for students. The question is, to what extent are academic staff, empowered to be able to support students long-term? When increasingly we have students, numbers of students increasing, workload increasing, so how do we support students long-term? For group, I think this is a question for group 1, but I think other people can give ideas, because they said support long-term for students. How do you do that? We already...
This was also in relationship to the issue about when people go on leave or sabbatical or have to take sick leave or have reduced working time. I mean, obviously we're all in favor of making people's workloads compatible with what they're capable of supporting themselves, but often when those decisions are made, the workload is dispersed to other people, which increases their workload. And I think the point that our group wanted to make was that there should be some financial implications absorbed somewhere when we give people time away for leave, so that the departments and individuals don't suffer indiscriminately because of that.
Thank you. I think that is a suggestion that looks like is a wider discussion than this one, because I think something like this is already implemented in the United States. But here, I think it's a systemic issue that needs to be addressed, broadly. Thank you. Can we give Group 1? And then Group 2, we have Professor Ann Webb and Petrocola Assistant. Are you sleeping? Petrocola has the microphone. You can sit together. So.
He's going to make sure I say all the right things. Our stories came from very recently, from far in the past, from other countries.
Okay.
But there was a common theme we found to all of them, which was that the people involved had taken a negative that had occurred to them and they'd turned it into a positive in the sense of making sure it doesn't happen to anybody else, so that as they have progressed through their career, they've made sure that when they get into the more senior positions, that they are supporting people beneath them and making sure that other people are not suffering in the way that they suffered. And so that was kind of our real positive. That all these people were helping others not to suffer as they had done, and recognising that. So, if something negative happens, turn it into a positive and make sure it doesn't happen to other people. And alongside that, other things that help with that are having role models, people like you in senior positions, so that you can go to someone and know or expect that they will have some understanding of what you're talking about. And in our case, we're really able to help. And in being aware of how the system works, so that you can make sure that you help other people to understand the system, and help to bring them forward and empower and encourage them. I think the other thing was to ensure that small silos don't exist, because if you have a small group and people don't really interact very much with a bigger institute or a bigger group, then you don't know any different. You know how your small group works, and you don't necessarily understand that things are maybe not quite as they should be. And so just encouraging everybody to interact at all sorts of levels, so that we don't get a silo mentality anywhere, and that people can understand that things don't have to be as they are within a smaller grouping.
This is wonderful. Thank you. I think there is...
Can I just make one other point? I have to say this. For all the lecturers here at Manchester, that we had an experience from someone who's experienced education in different countries and is very happy that here in Manchester we teach people to learn to love a subject rather than just giving them information. So thank you to all the lecturers and all the teaching staff.
Thank you. I need to emphasize some things. It says turning negatives into positives. You know, we have a tendency to maximize pain, you know, maximize complain from every day because it looks as if it's a norm. But within the complaints, within the pain, there is always going to be something to learn. So sometimes we are afraid of facing the process. That's what I discovered, that sometimes when you focus too much on the pain, then you wouldn't know, maybe there are certain things you need to learn to be more open or to be less aggressive or to be able to communicate your information in ways that somebody else may be able to help you. And that somebody else, you know, it takes somebody who is mature, open-minded, open to listening and understanding before they can act in your case. So I think that's a very important thing that we learned from there. Thank you very much. Another thing I wanted us to pick from that discussion, which was very powerful, is helping other people to understand the system. I think it's very important. Sometimes we have people, you know, they want things to happen now. In a system that has different hierarchy, it is an organic system. I think there is a need that people who have been established in a way kind of use it as an induction so that they know, okay, these people understand this, these are the ways things work. What we did with our student ambassadors, I don't know if Catherine Harrison is here. Okay, she isn't. Was that even for simple things like the payment of their dues, it takes a process. There are people who need to sign, who need to ascertain that they are properly signed, and then check it before it goes to the people who will actually pay. So this process can take a week, can take 2 weeks, can take 3 weeks, depending on when things are signed. So having to communicate this kind of information to the students will give them peace of mind. That's number one. Understand that this is an organization, a big institution, not just one corner shop. And it will also help them to maintain that peace they need to. So these are the things we need for new students, we need for new staff, new colleagues. So thank you very much for that aspect. And ensuring that we don't have a siloed mentality, I think we will develop. Thank you. We have the next group, that is group 3. And this was facilitated by Professor Hilary Jogegan and assisted by Rachel Yan.
Hello? Can you hear me? Oh, my voice. Thanks everyone. Yeah, we had a good session. And what we're going to talk about ranges from the personal, the interpersonal, to the organisational. So lots of good stuff, echoing what Anne and the group 1 was saying as well. So what creates sort of this in practice? Creating space to share voices and ideas. So this idea of togetherness rather than sort of awayness. So not away days, but together days. Being comfortable with food and tea and coffee and nice environment. Being persistent to make change, maybe using data, evidence, track record to sort of show maybe what other places are doing, what we could do. Policy and organisational levels, so actually having access to those and having your allies in those spaces, and then being able to make change there and recognising our own positions in that. Integrating EDIA in all discussions, again, not at that point about not being siloed, not being a conversation that happens over here with one particular group and they're the only people that talk about it. More support for empowerment and upskilling. There's a beautiful story that obviously I'm not at liberty to share, but that piece about maybe bringing other aspects of your life to your work that you might not have seen a connection in, but then that could actually open the door to other things. Initiation by one person can spread. So quiet, slow, small activisms daily can have a big impact. And 2 more points. One is very much one in practice. The idea of 2 feet. So the being in a space, you actually have the option to stay or to go. And sometimes, you know, you could have that as a policy to have a sort of no judgment if people decide to go or move to a different space. So thinking about that's okay. And the final one around caring and self-care. and centering those things. And self-care can just be saying, no, I don't want to do that today. Not necessarily kind of the ways it's been a bit exploited with yoga and Pilates and everything like that. More just sort of, yeah, taking care of yourself and care of others. Thanks, group.
Thank you. I think there are a few things I would like to emphasize there. It says, bringing yourself to work, bringing your community self, bringing yourself as a family here, bringing yourself as a family person, bringing your authentic self. And then also caring and self-care. I think with the way things are, we have a tendency to want to overwork. And when you are overworked, you give the output of overwork to someone else. And that can translate into many things: aggression, not being sympathetic, not being passionate, and it's a long-term process. So I think self-care is very important. As much as we have the workload, we also have to think of ourselves first. It is only 1 minute silence for somebody who has passed on. Thank you. And we have group 4, and this group were facilitated by Amy and Eleanor and assisted by David.
Hello everyone, sorry we're sat at the back, so just switch around, although you can hear me without having to look at me. So a lot of our overall themes that sort of came out after listening to a few anecdotes were all about leadership and power dynamics and how they sort of feed into the way that things are handled and dealt with. So a lot of ours sort of came under the idea of grievances and how things are dealt with within teams, within the university, and the policies that are in place. Main thing we came to the conclusion of was active listening. And this is especially true for line managers or for anyone that has any sort of management or leadership position within the uni, within life. Active listening. I said this earlier, but my dad used to say we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You have to start listening before you start giving solutions or providing support. One of our anecdotes came forth and said, you know, they didn't exactly know what I needed and they didn't listen. And I didn't have the opportunity to tell them what I needed, so therefore my support wasn't great. So active listening was one of the main things, and I think a lot of us spoke about being in management positions and having to put your ego behind you and admit that you do not know the answers to everything. So, like you said earlier, we're not the whole orange. We do not have every single answer, and it's okay to respond to someone who's looking for support and say, I don't know everything about that. Let's work together, find the resources, find the tools, and provide you with some support there. So active listening, leaving your ego behind, admitting that you don't know the best way to go forward, and maybe working together, doing some mutual learning. Tools to support. One of the main things we came across was actually providing people with practical support. So not just words of affirmation or validation, which, as great as they aren't particularly helpful if you do want to take something forward in a professional manner. So providing people with, links, with messages and emails that have the information in the email of the person you can speak to about this. And if you don't know that information, you say, I don't know it, but I will go away and find it and bring it back to you. Admitting you don't know, and sort of lastly, centering the person. So it's very, very easy with someone who comes to you and saying, I'm having a bad time, for you to go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Is there something like, what can I do? And you start feeling that it's your responsibility to take that on. It's not about you, it's about the other person. So centering that other person and saying, what can we do? How can we help? And just making sure that they are centered in their own sort of support and care. It was a lot on similar themes, but I thought it was all really important. And actually the anecdotes that came out were quite similar. So that was useful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This brings us to the end of the questions and synopsis. Do you want to say something, maybe to ask a question before we go to the vote of thanks? Anybody wants to say something? Or to ask a question or to clarify certain things? Yes, please.
Is this the end of the event, Cecilia? I'm just like, that's not my question. But there was a question that came up in our group discussion, and I thought it would be worth raising because I'm just thinking who's in the room right now to hear the question and then maybe give an answer.
Okay.
Is around the fantastic work that's happened today and in the whole pilot study, and obviously the set of principles that will be emerged, and we've talked about how they will sort of roll forward within engaging environments. But how will they roll forward within the University of Manchester? Where in the senior leadership team is this going to be sort of picked up and carried forward? Who are those allies that are, and I think they're in this room, are in this in place really to work with you to lift that up and carry you on that journey. I think we talked a bit about our own sort of personal commitments that we might make, and I'm really excited to do these postcards. But is there an institutional commitment that might be made or could potentially be made here?
Thank you. I think that is where we have people here. There is a microphone. Please.
Sorry to the person whose question that was, I just garbled it, but I thought this might have been the space to raise it.
No, that's perfectly fine, and it's a good question, and you're right to ask it. In the senior leadership, myself, the buck stops with me in terms of EDI issues. Adele, you heard this morning, is partner in this, and Patrick Hackett, our registrar and chief operating officer again. And there is a buy-in to the strategy from the whole leadership team. So we will be announcing a new strategy soon. There's been wide consultation on it, so we don't want to just put out a fancy document. It needs to be actioned, and there has to be a buy-in. And the consultation was there because precisely we want the buy-in from people, because we all need to have a sense of shared ownership of that. And I said it in our group, certainly, that I could put out a really great strategy, and it looks amazing, the amazing words on it, but unless we all buy into it and we all make the change, things won't change. So you could have the right processes in place, you could have the right policies in place. If we all don't individually make the change, nothing will change. So there has to be a partnership from not just the leadership, but also from our staff, our students. We all have to be partners in this.
Thank you very much. Does that answer the question?
It does in part.
Okay.
I suppose because I think I was thinking more about like this activity that's happening here and the principles that will come from this connectivity and inclusivity action, how that then sort of gets adopted, right? So I'm thinking beyond kind of the university's own strategy and more here about what's happened in this room and this space with these people.
We will be taking the findings from here and sharing it with the EDI Directorate. You've seen a number of people from the Directorate are here and taking notes, and we'll try and action things. I've found this session to be, well, the whole day to be very useful. I've learned a lot myself, and we'll certainly take that back with me.
Thank you very much. So that was why, at the first workshop we were privileged to have the director of EDIA, Banji Adewumi. We couldn't have her now, but she was in the middle of writing the strategy. So this comes at a time whereby hearing from others and then preparing for us can actually fit in. And part of the principles that Cindy was talking about and distributing, she also fed into it. And so Adele, too, had been a part of the system. So thank you very much, Nalin, and thank you for the question. So thank you very much. We are now at the end of our workshop. So we have our head of department, Professor Mike Burton, who will say a few words. Can you?
Well, I don't want to say anything other than a massive thank you to Cecilia. So can we just give her a round of applause?
Thank you.
Putting this all together.
Thank you.
And also to all of you who've taken the time, particularly the people who've come from outside of Manchester. I mean, it's a long way to come for many of you, and it's massively appreciated that our time is our most precious commodity. And so focusing our time on this session today has been really very useful indeed. So thanks to all of you for coming. And I think one of the things I've taken away from this is that EDIA is very much at the centre of everything we do. And getting the best out of everyone is really the focus of this. And making sure we all can work and reach our potential and do the best we can. And it's a journey. We're not there yet, but we can keep on walking in the right direction. And so, again, thank you so much, Cecilia. Very good job.
So it's 3 o'clock. Can you see the alarm? Thank you very much. So we wish you a safe journey. And by the time we synthesize, no way. Cindy wants to speak. So please take your time to sign a note to yourself. And in a few months, you will receive something in your post box.